I am Gregory Caldwell. I am 71 years old. Last Tuesday, my son Leo and my daughter-in-law Sabrina had me committed to the Golden Valley nursing home claiming I had dementia. They thought they were being smart, that they'd finally gotten rid of the old man and his meager pension. What they didn't know is that 48 hours later, I used their trap to buy the entire facility. This Sunday, when they arrived for their weekly guilt trip visit, they found the visiting hours had been changed from 24/7 to never. Before I tell you exactly how I did it and the look on their faces when security escorted them out, do me a favor. Let me know in the comments where you are listening to this story from. And hit that like button if you believe that underestimating your elders is the last mistake you should ever make. The whole thing started 4 days ago at their house, Leo's house. The air in their sprawling, sterile living room was thick with an unnatural concern. My daughter-in-law Sabrina was fussing over me, fluffing a pillow behind my back. "Dad, you just seem fragile lately," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness so fake it could curdle milk. "Leo and we've just been so worried about you." I am 71 years old. I've been an engineer for 45 years. I've built bridges that withstand earthquakes. I am many things, but fragile is not one of them. I nodded politely, sipping the lukewarm tea she'd handed me. "That's very kind of you, dear. But I'm fine. Just enjoying retirement." Enjoying retirement. To them, that meant sitting in my small lakeside cottage, a place Alice and I bought in the 1970s, a place I still live. They see the old car, the faded flannel shirts, the simple meals. They see a poor old engineer living off a meager pension. They see exactly what my late wife Alice and I wanted them to see. They have no idea about the biotech investments, the offshore accounts, or the portfolio I manage before the market even opens. They don't know that my meager pension is just pocket money. They see a burden. And that night, they had decided it was time to manage that burden. The doorbell rang. Leo shot Sabrina a look, a nervous, "it's time" kind of look. "That must be him," Leo said, wiping his sweaty palms on his expensive trousers. A moment later, a man in an equally expensive suit walked in. He had silver hair and cold, appraising eyes. "Dad," Leo said, his voice strained. "This is Dr. Shaw. He's a family consultant. He's here to help us talk through some things." I stood up to shake his hand, but Dr. Shaw didn't offer his. He just observed me as if I were a specimen. This wasn't a consultant. This was an ambush. We sat back down. The untouched dinner on the table was forgotten. Sabrina pulled out a leather-bound notepad. "Dr. Shaw," she began, her voice taking on a rehearsed, somber tone. "We've prepared a list of the incidents we discussed, the ones that have us so concerned." "Incidents?" I asked, my voice flat. "Dad, don't be difficult." Leo snapped, his mask of concern slipping. "Like the gas stove." My stomach tightened. "What about the gas stove?" "I came over last Tuesday," Sabrina said, addressing the doctor, but aiming her words at me. "The whole house smelled of gas. I found Dad in the living room reading. He had left one of the burners on unlit for hours. He could have blown up the whole house. He didn't even notice." "That's a lie," I said calmly. Sabrina's eyes flashed. "What? That's a lie," I repeated. "My house doesn't have a gas stove, Sabrina. It's been all electric since 1985. I was there. I cooked lunch. I remember turning off the electric coil. I can show you the receipt for the groceries." Sabrina's face flushed. She was furious that I'd caught her in such a sloppy, obvious lie. "No, I meant the other stove, the small one on the back patio." "The barbecue grill?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're saying I went outside in the pouring rain, turned on the propane tank, lit a burner, then turned it off, but left the gas running? That's your story." "You see, Doctor," Sabrina said, turning to Shaw, her voice suddenly cracking with manufactured pain. "He's confused. He's mixing everything up. He's in denial. This is what we deal with. Dr. Shaw nodded gravely, scribbling a note on his own pad. Denial is a very common symptom, Mr. Caldwell. What else? I asked, my voice turning to ice. I looked directly at my son. Leo, what other incidents have you fabricated? Leo wouldn't meet my gaze. He stared at his $1,000 shoes. The driving dad. You got lost last week. You called me, remember? You were completely disoriented. You thought you were in Millwood. You were 30 miles from home. My blood ran cold. I was 30 miles from home because you gave me the wrong directions, Leo. I called you for the address to that new hardware store. You sent me on a wild goose chase. I even joked with you about it, that your navigation was terrible, and you laughed. I never did that, Leo said, looking up his face, a mask of false innocence. Dad, why would I do that? You were confused. I had to talk you down for 20 minutes. You were panicked. He was lying. He was lying to my face about a conversation we'd had just days ago. The sheer audacity of it, the calculated cold-blooded cruelty, it was breathtaking. Dr. Shaw chimed in, his voice smooth and practiced like a funeral director's. It's classic confabulation, Mr. Caldwell. The mind creates false memories to cover the gaps where the dementia is setting in. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And the bills? Sabrina added, flipping a page on her notepad, clearly moving to the next item on her script. He's forgetting to pay his bills. We got a final notice from the electric company. His power was about to be cut off. We had to pay it for him just to save him the embarrassment. You paid my bill. Of course we did, she said, radiating a false martyrdom. We're your family. I stared at her. Sabrina, the mailman, hands me my mail directly every day at 2 p.m. I haven't seen an electric bill in 2 months. I assumed it was on autopay, which I set up in 2010. He hands it to you, Sabrina stammered, caught again. I mean, he must have missed it. The mail is unreliable. The point is, you forgot. You're forgetting things, Dad. Dangerous things. I knew then. She hadn't just seen the mail. She had taken the mail. She had intercepted my bills, let them go delinquent, paid them at the last second, all to build this pathetic, fraudulent case against me. This was the son I had taught to fish. This was the daughter-in-law whose crushing student loans I had anonymously paid off as a wedding gift, just so they could start their lives debt-free. I turned to Dr. Shaw. And you, Doctor, you are swallowing this. You are taking the word of 2 people who clearly stand to gain from this diagnosis. Have you run a single test on me, an MRI, a cognitive exam? Dr. Shaw closed his notebook. He leaned forward, placing his manicured hands together. Mr. Caldwell, Gregory, I am an expert in geriatric psychology. I see this every day. Your children love you very much. His eyes were completely devoid of all compassion. They are trying to help you, and frankly, your agitation, your paranoia about them framing you, it only confirms my diagnosis. What diagnosis? I demanded. Dr. Shaw looked at Leo, a silent confirmation, then back at me. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented by your family and your own confused and combative behavior. Tonight, it is my professional opinion that you are suffering from rapid onset senile dementia. Dementia. The word hung in the air, a death sentence. You can't be serious, I whispered. That's insane. Which is precisely the problem, Sabrina said softly, placing a hand on Leo's arm. Leo stood up. He walked over to the antique bowl by the door where I always placed my keys. He picked up my car keys. Leo, I said, my voice low. Give me my keys. I can't, Dad. He wouldn't look at me. He just pocketed them. It's for your own safety. You can't be driving anymore. So what happens now? I asked, looking at the 3 of them. The predators. You're going to lock me in this house. No, Leo said, finally looking at me, his eyes full of a strange, terrible pity. We found you a wonderful place, Dad. The best. It's called Golden Valley Senior Living. They have round-the-clock care. They can manage your condition. And right on cue, as if summoned by the devil himself, I heard it. Through the expensive double-paned windows of their multi-million-dollar home, I heard it. A faint sound growing closer. A siren. An ambulance. They hadn't just planned an intervention. They had planned an extraction. The ambulance is already on its way, Leo stammered, confirming the final betrayal. They're here to take you. It's all arranged. It's for the best, Dad. It's for your own good. I stood up. But it wasn't the stance of a defeated old man. It was the stance of an engineer who had just seen the fatal flaw in their design. They thought they were checking me into a prison. They had no idea they were checking me into my next boardroom. The ambulance doors swung open, not to a valley, but to a concrete curb stained with something I didn't want to identify. The name Golden Valley Senior Living was written in cheerful, peeling yellow letters above the entrance, a cruel joke. Inside, the air wasn't fresh. It was heavy, thick with the smell of industrial antiseptic boiled cabbage and the faint, unmistakable tang of old urine. A woman was groaning softly down the hall, a sound that was immediately shushed by a harsh voice. Sabrina marched to the front desk, pen in hand, already signing the final admission forms. She didn't look at me. Not once. A large, surly orderly with dead eyes approached me with a plastic bin. All right, Grandpa. Personal effects. Wallet, phone, watch belt. I hesitated, my hand instinctively covering the pocket where my phone was. My link to the outside world. My link to Harrison. Just protocol, Dad, Leo muttered, still refusing to meet my eyes. The orderly's thick fingers snapped impatiently. I slowly placed my worn leather wallet in the bin. My old Timex watch, the one Alice gave me for our 30th anniversary. Finally, my phone. Thank you, Sabrina said to the nurse, handing over the clipboard. She turned to me, her smile bright and cold as a diamond. We'll manage your finances from here, Dad. It's safer this way. You just focus on getting settled. She patted my arm. The bin with my life's connections was snapped shut. The door clicked locked behind me. This wasn't a home. It was a prison. And my children had just handed over the keys. They took everything. My wallet, my watch, my phone, my dignity. They led me down a beige hallway that smelled of bleach and despair to a small, cold room. The orderly, a large man named Frank, with a face like a clenched fist, pointed to the thin gray-blue pajamas I was still wearing from the intervention at Leo's house. Those two, Grandpa. You get the standard gown. Hospital policy. I was forced to change in front of him. I, Gregory Caldwell, who had chaired board meetings that decided the fate of multi-billion-dollar mergers, was standing half-naked under a flickering fluorescent light, being treated like a piece of defective livestock. They handed me the thin gown. It tied at the back, and the ties were too short. It never fully closed. Pockets. Empty them. Frank grunted, holding out a clear plastic bag. I reached into the pajama pockets I was handing over. A used tissue. A lip balm. And in the small breast pocket, my fingers brushed against the cold, familiar metal. I pulled it out. The 1884 Morgan silver dollar. It looked dull and unimportant under the harsh light. Frank squinted his thick fingers, snatching it from my palm. What's this? I told you no cash. I had to think fast. I let my voice tremble, let my body slump into the role they had cast for me. My wife, I whispered the word catching in my throat. Alice, she gave it to me before she passed. It's just my lucky piece. Frank snorted a cruel, ugly sound. Lucky doesn't look so lucky from where you're sitting, old man. He was about to drop it into the plastic bag with my shoes, to be locked away in a storage room lost forever. My heart stopped. My entire plan, my entire life was about to be sealed in a Ziploc bag by a man named Frank. "Oh, for God's sake, just let him keep the stupid coin." Sabrina's voice, sharp and impatient, echoed from the doorway. She was tapping her expensive shoe, clearly annoyed by the delay. "It's a piece of junk silver, Frank. It's worthless. If it keeps him quiet and cooperative, let him have it. We are paying for the premium comfort package, aren't we?" Her arrogance was a thing of terrible beauty. Frank, clearly annoyed at being overruled, but unwilling to challenge a premium client, shoved the coin back into my hand. His skin was rough against mine. "Fine, don't swallow it." I closed my fist around it. The cold metal bit into my palm, an anchor in a raging sea. Sabrina turned and walked away, her heels clicking, satisfied with her little display of power. She thought she had granted a pathetic old man a final meaningless trinket. She had no idea she had just handed me the loaded gun I would use to destroy her. She thought it was worthless. She had no idea that this single coin, this piece of junk silver, held the keys to a kingdom she couldn't even begin to comprehend. It wasn't just a lucky piece. It was a custom-milled military-grade hardware wallet. A cold wallet. Alice, my Alice, had it commissioned years ago. She was the brilliant one. Always. I was the engineer. I understood structures, mathematics, the physical world. Alice. Alice understood the future. I remember her in the late 90s sitting at our simple Formica kitchen table surrounded by printouts from the early internet. The rest of the world was buying pets.com. Alice was reading obscure white papers on genomics and a strange new field called biotechnology. "Gregory," she said one night, her eyes electric with a light I hadn't seen since we were young. "They're mapping the human genome. This isn't a gold rush, darling. This is the creation of the world. Again. We have to be a part of it." She found 3 tiny unknown startups. GeneSys Therapeutics was one. Neurocore was another. They were run by wild-eyed academics with brilliant ideas and no business sense. We put every spare dollar we had into them. We were angel investors before the term was fashionable, before it was glamorous. We were just 2 middle-aged people betting our meager savings on Alice's profound intuition. 2 of those companies failed within the year. They vanished. Our money was gone. But GeneSys didn't. It stumbled. It nearly died. And then it found it. A breakthrough in synthetic protein mapping. It didn't just succeed. It exploded. It cured a specific rare type of macular degeneration. Our initial $50,000 investment, our entire life savings at the time, was now worth, well, let's just say Dr. Shaw's professional opinion that I was incompetent was the single most expensive mistake of his career. We were worth hundreds of millions, and we never told a soul. We never changed a thing. We stayed in the lakeside cottage. I kept my job as an engineer until I turned 65. Alice kept her vegetable garden. We drove the same old Buick. Why? Because of Leo. We looked at our son, and we saw the world we lived in. We saw his friends getting BMWs for their 16th birthdays. We saw them handed trust funds for graduating college. We saw the casual, easy entitlement of a generation that had never truly wanted for anything. "If we give him everything, Gregory," Alice argued, her hands covered in dirt from her garden, "he will learn the value of nothing." She was right. So we made a pact. We would teach our son the value of work, the dignity of earning his own way, the pride of building something himself, not just inheriting it. We lived modestly. We let him think we were just like everyone else, comfortable but not rich. We wanted to leave him something far more valuable than money. We wanted to leave him character. I felt the coin in my pajama pocket. It was heavy. It was heavy with the weight of that profound, catastrophic failure. The lesson hadn't worked. It had backfired. Instead of teaching him character, our modesty had cultivated resentment. He didn't see the virtue in our simple life. He saw failure. He saw a man who had only been an engineer. He saw a small lakeside cottage not as a home filled with memories, but as a fixer-upper he could flip for a quick buck to pay off his debts. I knew he had problems. I just didn't know how deep they went. I didn't know about the $1.2 million gambling debt. I didn't know Sabrina had been fired for embezzlement. I didn't know they were drowning. He didn't see a father. He saw an ATM with a weak pin. He and Sabrina weren't worried about me. They were angry at me, angry that I was old, angry that I was poor, and angry most of all that I was taking so damned long to die and give them the tiny pathetic inheritance they thought was coming. This coin. Alice had it made the year after her diagnosis. She knew she was leaving. She saw the first cracks in Leo's character, the first hints of Sabrina's raw greed. She saw them in a way I, blinded by fatherly love, could not. The coin looked identical to a real 1884 Morgan, but it was solid titanium milled by a defense contractor. Inside, shielded from any scanner, was a micro-ledger. "If the day ever comes, Gregory," she'd said, her voice thin as paper, but her will pure steel, "when they see you as a balance sheet instead of a father, when they treat you as a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved, you activate the Alice Protocol." The Alice Protocol. Our code word for total financial war. My call to Harrison, our lawyer in New York. The only other human on earth who knew the truth. This coin held the private keys, the access codes. Without it, the fortune was inaccessible, locked away. With it, I could move mountains. I could buy and sell entire corporations. I could, for instance, buy a rundown, mismanaged nursing home chain. Frank the orderly shoved me into room 12B. "This is you. Don't press the call button unless you're actively dying. And even then, think twice." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I sat on the thin vinyl mattress. It was cold. I could hear the man in the next room groaning a low, constant sound of human misery. They thought they had buried me. They thought they had won. I opened my fist. I looked at the face of Lady Liberty, her features worn smooth by time. Sabrina thought it was worthless. She had no idea. I wasn't trapped in here with them. They were trapped in here with me. The game had just begun. I spent that first night sitting upright in the chair. It was colder than my house, and the single paper-thin blanket they'd given me did nothing. I pressed the call button by the bed, the one Sabrina had supposedly paid premium for. I needed water. I pressed it at 10 p.m. I pressed it again at 11 p.m. At midnight, I stopped pressing. No one was coming. It wasn't just neglect. It was a strategy. They were trying to break me. Just before dawn, the door creaked open. It wasn't the heavy-footed Frank. It was a young nurse, her movements quick and quiet. Her name tag read Maria Diaz. She checked my vitals, her face tired but professional. As she was leaving, she paused, looked back at me shivering in the chair, then glanced down the empty dark hallway. In one swift motion, she grabbed an extra thick blanket from the linen cart outside and tossed it onto my lap. It was the first act of human warmth I had felt in what seemed like an eternity. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice hoarse. She hesitated, her hand on the doorframe. She leaned in close, so close I could smell the faint scent of coffee on her breath. Her voice was barely audible. "I saw what they did, Mr. Caldwell." I frowned. "What?" "Your family," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "When they admitted you. They paid extra for the special service." I had no idea what that meant. "Special service like better food?" Maria's eyes hardened with a deep professional anger. "No, it's a code. It means they're paying the floor manager extra to have staff ignore your call button. They want you to be difficult. They want you isolated." The blood drained from my face. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't incompetence. It was a plan. They were paying to have me tortured, paying to have me ignored to make me seem more confused, more desperate, to create the patient Dr. Shaw had fraudulently diagnosed. The sheer, calculated evil of it. I grabbed her arm, my fingers surprisingly strong. My voice was a desperate rasp. "Help me," I whispered. "Maria, please. They are trying to destroy me. I need a phone. A simple prepaid phone. I will pay you. I can pay you more than you make in a year." Her eyes widened in fear. I can't. I'll be fired." "They are stealing from me," I pleaded. "They are burying me alive. One call. That's all I need. One call." She looked at me, her face torn. She saw the truth in my eyes, the desperation, the sanity. She gave a single tiny, terrifying nod. "Tomorrow," she breathed. "Be patient." And then she was gone. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in that chair, pretending to be the senile old man they wanted. I ate the gray mush they served. I didn't press the call button. I just waited, my entire being focused on the sound of the shift change. Finally, at 3 a.m., the door creaked open. It was her. Maria. She went through the motions, checking my blood pressure cuff, marking a chart. Her back was to the door. The hallway was silent. "Are you asleep, Mr. Caldwell?" she whispered. I didn't move. "I have it," she breathed. "Don't react. I'm going to put it in your pillowcase when I fluff your pillow. Don't touch it until I am gone." My heart hammered against my ribs. I heard her move to the bed, the rustle of the cheap cotton pillowcase. I heard the faint, dull thud as the small, precious object was dropped inside. It was done. She finished her checks and left without another word. I waited 5 full minutes, my ears straining, listening for Frank's heavy footsteps in the hall. Nothing. My hands trembled as I reached into the pillowcase. My fingers closed around a small plastic prepaid burner phone. It felt like a brick of gold. It was my lifeline. But where to hide it? The room was bare. A metal bed frame, a thin mattress, a bedside table with a bolted-down lamp. There was nowhere. They did random checks. If Frank found this, it was over. Not just for me. For Maria. I lifted the corner of the thin, vinyl-covered mattress. I slid the phone onto the metal springs beneath, as far into the middle as I could reach. It wasn't perfect. If they searched, they would find it. I lay back down, my body rigid, clutching the Morgan dollar in one hand, while the phone lay hidden just inches beneath me. I had the tool. Now I just had to survive until I could use it. I waited until 3 a.m. The silence in Golden Valley wasn't peaceful. It was a dead, heavy silence broken only by the rhythmic click of the forced air heater and the low, constant groaning of the man in room 12C. I listened for Frank's heavy footsteps in the hall. Nothing. I'd been timing his rounds. He passed at 2:50 a.m. and wouldn't be back until 4. This was the window. My hands trembled so violently, I fumbled with the mattress. The cheap vinyl squeaked, a sound like a scream in the darkness. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. I counted to 60. No one came. I slid my hand along the cold metal springs until my fingers brushed the small plastic body of the burner phone. I pulled it out. The screen lit up my small, dark room, casting monstrous shadows on the wall. I cupped it under the thin gray blanket, my old stiff fingers punching in the number 1 agonizing digit at a time. This was the only number I had memorized for the last 20 years. The number my wife Alice had made me recite every night for a month, until I could do it in my sleep. The number for Harrison. It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. A click. A sleepy, irritated, multi-million-dollar voice from a New York penthouse 3,000 miles away. This had better be life or death. Harrison, I whispered. My voice was a dry, unused rasp. There was a dead pause. The sleepiness in his voice vanished, replaced by a sharp, sudden alarm that crackled across the line. Gregory. My God. What time is it? Are you all right? Are you in a hospital? Yes. I breathed the word catching in my throat. But not the way you think. What? What's wrong? I heard sheets rustling, a lamp click on. I'm booking the first flight. Do you need me in California? No, I said. I looked at the cracked, water-stained ceiling of my room. I could smell the bleach from the floor, the despair. No, I need you to do something. Anything, Gregory, you know that. Name it. I closed my eyes. For a second, I wasn't in Golden Valley. I was back in our simple kitchen 5 years ago. Alice was sitting at the table. The cancer had already taken so much, her body was frail, but her eyes were still pure forged steel. She had slid 2 things across the Formica tabletop, the Morgan silver dollar, and a single embossed business card. Harrison Stone, Stone and Associates, private counsel. He's the only one who knows Gregory, she'd said, her voice thin as paper, but her words heavy as lead. He's the only one I trust besides you. Alice, I don't like this. It feels deceptive. Leo is our son. She'd given me that look, the one that saw right through my optimistic denials, the one that had made her a legend in the investment world. He is our son, darling, which is why we have to protect him from himself. And she'd tapped her own chest, then mine, have to protect ourselves from him. He would. She'd insisted, her grip on my hand surprisingly tight. Not because he is evil, Gregory. Not yet. But because he is weak. And that woman he married, Sabrina, she is a void. She is a black hole of want. She will never ever have enough. And she sees your kindness not as a gift, but as a resource to be plundered. Leo's weakness and her greed, it's a terrible combustible combination. She was right. God, how she was right. So we have a plan. She'd continued, her breath short, but her will absolute. I've already discussed it with Harrison. If the day ever comes, if they stop seeing you as a father and start seeing you as a balance sheet, if they treat you as a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved, you call Harrison. You say the words. What words, Alice? She'd smiled, then a faint, sad, knowing smile. The Alice protocol. He'll know what it means. I opened my eyes. I was back in the cold, dark room. Back in the cage my son had locked me in. Harrison? I said, my voice suddenly steady, clear and cold. It's Gregory. I need you to activate the Alice protocol. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was heavier than any sound. It stretched for 5 seconds. 10. I could hear Harrison breathing. I could hear the 3,000-mile distance, the shock of a man who had just been handed a live grenade. Oh my God, Harrison finally whispered. His voice was no longer that of a high-powered lawyer. It was the voice of a friend. Alice, she really thought this day would come. She was right. She was right about everything. I said, the grief and the rage finally mixing, hardening into a toxic, potent fuel. Gregory, where are you? What did they do to you? I explained it all, the words tumbling out in a hurried, desperate whisper. The dinner, the fake concern, the ambush by Dr. Shaw, the fraudulent diagnosis of senile dementia, the incidents with the gas stove and the mail, the ambulance. I'm in a nursing home, Harrison, a place called Golden Valley. They had me committed. They used the old POA. The POA, Harrison sounded confused, angry. But that was the medical power of attorney for your heart surgery 3 years ago. It was procedure specific. It should have expired the moment you were discharged. They don't know that, I said. Or they don't care. They think it's a blank check. They think I'm a senile old fool. They think they have full control over everything. I paused and delivered the final blow. Harrison, they're going to sell my house. Sabrina said it this morning right in front of me. They're selling the lake house to pay for my care here. I heard the sound of a keyboard clicking furiously on the other end of the line. The friend was gone. The lawyer was back. They can't, Harrison said, his voice now a low, dangerous growl. The lake house is in the Alice Caldwell Trust. You are the sole trustee. It's ironclad. They can't sell it without your explicit notarized signature. Unless what? I whispered, a new dread creeping in. Unless they have a court order declaring you mentally incompetent, Harrison finished. Which is exactly what that Dr. Shaw and that intervention were about. Gregory, they weren't just committing you. They were building a legal case to liquidate you. The cold reality hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about getting me out of the way. This was about erasing me. Okay, Gregory. Listen to me very carefully. Harrison's voice was sharp now, commanding. You are not a patient. You are a prisoner of war. Your job right now is to survive. Keep pretending. Be the confused, harmless old man they want you to be. Smile, nod, be fragile. Do not under any circumstances let them know you are onto them. Do you understand me? I understand, I whispered. Good. I'm activating the protocol. As of this moment, I am moving $100 million from the main fund into a new firewalled crisis account that they cannot trace. I am hiring a private investigation team in California. Not just any team. The best. I want surveillance on Leo, on Sabrina, and on this Dr. Shaw 24/7. I want to know what they ate for breakfast. I want to know every dollar they spend. I want to know who they are talking to, and I want it all recorded. He paused, and I could practically hear him smiling. They think they're stealing your little cottage. They have no idea they've just declared war on a dragon. Thank you, Harrison. Don't thank me yet. Now, Gregory, hide that phone. Stay alive. I'll be in touch. We're coming to get you. He hung up. I slid the phone back under the mattress. I clutched the Morgan dollar in my hand. It was no longer cold. It felt warm, alive, with purpose. I lay back in the dark, the man's groans in the next room no longer bothering me. Let them think I was weak. Let them think I was beaten. Let them think I was just a senile old fool. Leo and Sabrina thought they were managing a burden. They had no idea that Harrison was already filing the paperwork. They didn't know that a team of the most ruthless investigators in the country was already on a plane. They didn't know. They had just made a multi-million-dollar mistake. The next morning they arrived. Leo and Sabrina. They walked into my room carrying a cheap bouquet of carnations, their faces plastered with those fake bright smiles that now made my stomach turn. Dad, Leo said, his voice offensively cheerful. We're here. How are you feeling today? Are they treating you well? I played the part Harrison had assigned me. I looked up at him, my eyes intentionally unfocused. Leo, is that you? It's good to see you, son. Sabrina bustled over, fluffing my pillow, the same one hiding my lifeline to the outside world. See Leo. He looks a little better today. A little more present. She turned that blinding false smile on me. We're taking care of everything on the outside, Dad. You don't have to worry about a single thing. Worry, I murmured, playing confused. Worry about what? Oh, just bills, the house upkeep. You know. She patted my hand, her touch cold as ice despite the smile. In fact, we have great news. I looked at her, waiting for the blow. We're finalizing the sale of the lake house, she said, as if discussing the weather. It's a huge burden off your shoulders. We found a cash buyer, so it's all moving very fast. We'll use that money to make sure your stay here is comfortable, indefinitely. It's almost all settled. She smiled, proud of herself, proud of her efficiency, proud of her cruelty. They weren't just planning to sell my house, they were doing it. They were liquidating my past, Alice's garden, my life's work to pay for their prison. I simply nodded, lowering my gaze, playing the defeated old man. That's nice, dear. Thank you for taking care of it. They left satisfied. They had just confessed their crime to my face. And now the war had truly begun. The call came at 2:15 a.m. I had the phone pressed so tight against my ear, my cartilage ached. The blanket pulled over my head to muffle the sound. Gregory, Harrison's voice was tight-clipped. It's done. The sale on the lake house closed this afternoon. $400,000. The money was wired to a new account opened by Leo using that fraudulent POA. It's gone. I closed my eyes. The news didn't hit me with a hot flash of rage. It was a cold, sharp, invasive thing, like a needle of ice sliding directly into my heart. Alice's garden, the porch we built, the dock where I taught Leo to fish, liquidated for $400,000. Less than a rounding error in my portfolio. Less than the cost of the car Harrison drove. They had sold my life for pocket change. The coldness didn't stay in my heart. It spread. It filled my veins, cleared my head, and sharpened my focus. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. All that remained was the engineer. I sat up in the dark, the phone now silent. I looked around my room, 12B. I looked at the flickering fluorescent light in the hallway. I listened to the ancient, rattling HVAC unit kick on a sound of failing bearings and dirty filters. I wasn't just a prisoner anymore. I was an inspector. I began to observe, not as a patient, but as the man who had designed power grids and load-bearing structures for 40 years. I saw the cracks in the foundation. I saw the cheap, single-pane windows that were bleeding heat. I saw the outdated, inefficient medical monitoring equipment models from 10-15 years ago. I saw a system that wasn't just cruel. It was inefficient. It was wasteful. It was poorly designed. It was failing. And in that moment I realized this entire facility was a house of cards, and I knew exactly where to push. My mind was sharp. The cold, logical part of me, the engineer, took over. I began to analyze my prison. I observed the staff. They were overworked, underpaid, and demoralized. Frank, the cruel orderly, wasn't the exception. He was the rule. They were all just waiting for their shift to end. I observed the infrastructure. The rattling HVAC unit wasn't just annoying. It was a decades-old train model, inefficient, running on failing bearings. They were probably paying 3 times what they should in utility bills. The IV stands weren't modern, smart pumps that regulate dosage. They were old-fashioned gravity drip models that required constant manual adjustments that no one was making. The wheelchairs. God, the wheelchairs. The bearings were shot. I could hear the metal-on-metal squeal from 2 hallways away. This place wasn't just cruel. It was cheap. It was being run into the ground. They were cutting costs at a level that wasn't just negligent. It was desperate. This wasn't a healthcare facility. It was a warehouse, and the inventory was dying. I had the what. I needed the who. The 3 a.m. call was agony. I fumbled for the phone under the mattress, my body screaming in protest from sleeping on the thin vinyl. Harrison, I whispered. Gregory. His voice was low, fast, and furious. The investigator is good. His name is Miles. He's already pulled their financials. Gregory, it's worse than we thought. I waited. The man in 12C was groaning. Sabrina, Harrison said. She wasn't just worried about you. She was terminated from her job at the law firm 3 weeks ago. My blood ran cold. Fired why? Embezzlement, Harrison said. The word hit me like a stone. She was caught diverting client retainer funds, almost $80,000. They didn't press charges, but they fired her. She's broke Gregory, and she's sloppy. $80,000. It was pathetic. She had thrown away her career for so little. And it gets worse, Harrison continued, his voice grim. Leo, Gregory, he doesn't just have a gambling problem. He has a gambling catastrophe. What are you talking about? He's not just playing poker, he's into high-stakes sports betting. He's deep, very deep. How deep, Harrison? I whispered. There was a heavy pause on the line. According to Miles, he owes $1.2 million. And not to a casino in Vegas, Gregory. He owes it to a private bookmaking syndicate. The kind of people who don't take you to court when you miss a payment. 1.2 million. The number was so large it was almost abstract. My son. My weak, foolish son. The boy I'd taught to value hard work had become a man who would bet his entire life on a game he couldn't control. This wasn't just greed. This was sheer animal panic. They weren't just trying to get rich. They were trying to survive. They were trying to plug a hole that was about to drown them. And they were using me as the plug. I spent the next day in a daze processing the information. The cruelty now had a motive, a desperate, pathetic motive. When Maria came on her shift, I was ready. She quickly checked my room, then slipped inside, closing the door most of the way. Mr. Caldwell, you look terrible, she whispered. Maria, I need information. Who owns this place? Not the floor manager. Who signs the checks? Who owns the building? She was nervous. I don't know. That's management stuff. I just work the floor. Why, look at that heart monitor. I pointed to the bulky beige machine in the corner. That's a Hewlett-Packard 7835. They stopped making replacement parts for that in 1998. The IV pump is a Baxter. I know because I invested in the company that made its replacement 20 years ago. I leaned forward, my engineer's mind connecting the dots. This facility is running on fumes, isn't it? You're short-staffed. The equipment is ancient. They're cutting costs everywhere. Her eyes filled with a sudden frustrated anger. Yes, she admitted. You're right. It's awful. They cut our overtime. They switched to a cheaper food supplier last month. The meat is inedible. We're always short on basic supplies, even sterile gauze. Who is doing this? It's a corporation, she said, the word sounding like a curse. A big faceless private equity firm, Crestview Holdings. They're based somewhere on the East Coast. They bought this chain of nursing homes about 5 years ago, loaded it with debt, and have been sucking every last penny out of it ever since. She leaned in closer. And we hear rumors, Mr. Caldwell, all the time. The paychecks are late. The suppliers are suing for non-payment. They're not just cutting corners. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. Crestview Holdings. I filed the name away. The second call from Harrison came 2 nights later, 3:15 a.m. Gregory, I have the closing documents for the lake house. The 400,000, I said, the number tasting like ash. Harrison, that property is prime lakefront. It's worth at least 1.5 million even in this market. I know, Harrison said. They didn't sell it, Gregory. They liquidated it. They sold it 70% below market value to an all-cash buyer, a shell corporation. They were in a hurry. I whispered, the pieces clicking into place. The loan sharks. They needed the money now. That's just it, Harrison said, his voice dangerously quiet. I thought so too, but I checked the timeline. Gregory, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm listening. The sale on the house. It wasn't finalized after they committed you. I frowned. What? The sale closed 2 days before the intervention. The notary's stamp is dated. The wire transfer for the $400,000 cleared Leo's new bank account at 10:05 a.m. on Tuesday. My mind raced. But Tuesday, that was the day. Yes. Harrison finished the final devastating piece locking into place. That was the day of the dinner, the day of the ambush, the day they had you committed. I finally understood. The intervention wasn't the start of their plan. It was the end. They had already committed the theft. They had already forged my signature using that fraudulent POA. They had already stolen my house and cashed the check. They didn't lock me up to get the money. They locked me up to keep it. The dementia diagnosis. Dr. Shaw, the staged incidents. It was all a desperate, brilliant, evil cover-up. It was to ensure that when I inevitably discovered the house was gone, I would have no legal standing. I would be a confused old man. My word against a doctor's diagnosis and my loving family's testimony. They weren't just trying to rob me. They were trying to erase me. The call came at 3:17 a.m. It was so urgent I barely had time to pull the phone from under the mattress before Harrison's voice was in my ear. He wasn't angry this time. He wasn't grim. He was electric. "Gregory," he said, his voice a low, fast, triumphant hiss. "I've got them. Oh God, Gregory, I have got them." "What is it, Harrison? What did you find?" "Crestview Holdings," he said, practically buzzing. "I've been digging into their corporate structure all night. It's a mess of shell companies and debt, just like your nurse said. They're leveraged to the hilt, absolutely desperate for cash." "But that's not the good part, is it?" I whispered, my own pulse quickening. "No, that is not the good part." Harrison laughed, a sharp barking sound. "Gregory, do you remember the investment you and Alice made in Neurocore?" I frowned. "Neurocore? That was one of the failures. It went under." "No, it didn't," Harrison said. "It didn't fail. It was acquired. It was bought for pennies on the dollar in 2003 by a larger holding company, which was then acquired by an even bigger private equity firm. Gregory, the firm that acquired them. It's the parent company of Crestview Holdings." I sat bolt upright in the dark, the thin mattress groaning. My mind was racing. "What? What are you saying, Harrison?" "I'm saying," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, that based on Alice's original investment and the subsequent stock-for-stock acquisitions, "Gregory, you own 8% of their parent company." I couldn't breathe. "You're not just a victim, Gregory," Harrison said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You are one of their largest individual shareholders. You have a seat on their board of directors that you've never claimed. They have no idea who you are. They have no idea that the senile old man they're trying to liquidate is their boss." I sat there in the dark, the phone pressed hard against my ear. The man in 12C was still groaning, but I didn't hear him anymore. All I could hear was the beautiful, perfect mechanical click of a massive steel trap snapping shut. 8%. A seat on the board. They had put me inside their own company. They had locked me inside their own vault. I started to laugh. It began as a low chuckle, a dry, rusty sound from a throat raw with disuse. I hadn't laughed in weeks. It wasn't a laugh of happiness. It was a laugh of pure, cold, beautiful irony. "Gregory," Harrison asked, his voice cautious, Are you all right?" I wiped a tear from my eye. "Harrison," I said, and my voice was no longer the voice of a weak old man. It was the voice of the engineer who had built empires. It was the voice of the man Alice had married. "I'm better than all right. I'm clear." I took a deep breath, the stale antiseptic air tasting suddenly sweet. "Harrison, I don't want to sue them. Suing is messy, Suing is weak. Suing is what they would do. What do you want to do, Gregory? I smiled into the darkness. I want to destroy them. I want to own the cage they put me in. I want to own the very air they breathe. I want them to understand what they did not in a courtroom, but in a boardroom. Harrison. Activate the full Alice protocol. The part she and I discussed, if things ever went this bad. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Gregory, are you sure the full protocol? That's scorched earth. They sold my wife's home, Harrison. They tried to erase my mind. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Scorch the earth. Burn it all down. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. I heard Harrison exhale a slow, deliberate breath. Scorched earth it is, Gregory. The full Alice protocol, God help them. The plan was forged in whispers in the dead of night, surrounded by the smell of bleach and human misery. I, the supposed senile patient, lay in my cot, the blanket pulled over my head, dictating financial warfare into a $9 burner phone. All right, Harrison, I whispered, my mind racing, the engineer in me coming alive. Here's the schematic. Crestview Holdings is desperate. We know this. Maria confirmed their paychecks are bouncing. They're being sued. They're bleeding cash. Miles confirms it. Harrison's voice was a low growl in my ear. Their stock is in the toilet. They're toxic. They're actively seeking a buyer for their entire senior care portfolio to stop the bleeding. They have 12 facilities, including yours. They're trying to sell it as a package deal, but no one is biting. It's too much debt, too much liability. Good, I said. Liability is just a number. Debt is just a tool. Here is what we do. I want you to go into the Alice Protocol wallet. You know the one, the rainy day fund. I thought back to Alice 20 years ago, sitting across from me after the first major payout from Gene Sis. I'd wanted to buy a boat. She'd looked at me with that smile that always meant she was 5 moves ahead. A boat. Gregory, that's what you want. A depreciating asset. I wasn't just an engineer. I was a negotiator. In my prime, I'd brokered deals between billion-dollar aerospace contractors. I'd sat across from government officials and corporate titans, men who ate weakness for breakfast. I learned to be the quietest man in the room, to listen to everything, to speak last, and to make my one offer the only one that mattered. Alice had that same instinct. But where I was a scalpel, she was a broadsword. We don't buy toys, darling, she had said, sliding a document across the table. We buy leverage. We're going to create a fund. We'll call it the Rainy Day Fund, and we will never ever touch it until it's pouring. Now I was in the middle of a typhoon. It's pouring, Harrison, I whispered into the phone. Liquidate $10 million from the fund. I want it in a clean, untraceable holding company by morning. Call it AC Trust. Alice Caldwell, Harrison said softly. I like it. 10 million. Done. What's the play? It's a two-pronged attack. I said, my mind building the strategy like a blueprint. First, the 8%. As a major shareholder, I want you to file an emergency injunction tomorrow. I want a full audit of Crestview. I want to see every dime they've spent, every corner they've cut, every safety violation in this hellhole and the other 11. I want to leak to the press that a major concerned shareholder is investigating the board for criminal negligence. That will tank their stock completely, Harrison said, a note of admiration in his voice. It will create a panic. Exactly, I said. We create the panic. We make them more desperate. We become the fire. And the second prong, the AC Trust, I replied. While their building is burning, we show up with the water. 48 hours after you file the injunction, while the board is in full-blown panic, AC Trust will make an offer. An all-cash, no-questions-asked offer to buy the entire senior care portfolio. Every facility, every employee, every resident, every lawsuit. They'll be so desperate to stop the bleeding and the audit. They'll see it as a lifeline. Harrison breathed, catching on. They won't even look at who's behind the trust. They'll just sell. They'll sell, I confirmed. And they'll sell it for pennies on the dollar just to make the problem go away. They'll sell it to me. I remembered a negotiation in Tokyo. A Japanese CEO had been trying to bully me, yelling, posturing, threatening to walk. I just sat there. I let him scream for 20 minutes. When he was finished, red-faced and panting, I leaned forward and said, "Are you done? Because my offer hasn't changed. But in 60 seconds, it's going to go down by 10%. I got the deal. Leo and Sabrina had only ever seen the flannel shirt-wearing, quiet lakeside-dwelling dad. They had no idea who I was. They had no idea about the man who had built this fortune. They saw a quiet pond, and they had no idea it was miles deep and full of sharks. "It's beautiful, Gregory," Harrison said. "It's ruthless. It's exactly what Alice would have done." "Yes, it is," I said, a cold, hard satisfaction settling in my chest. "Now, Harrison, let's talk about the details. I don't just want to buy the facility. I want to own the debt that Leo owes, the 1.2 million. The bookies, Gregory, that's dangerous. Those aren't public companies." "I don't care," I said. "Everyone has a price. Those bookies aren't in the business of breaking legs. They're in the business of making money. Find them. Find out who holds the note. Offer them 70 cents on the dollar, all cash, untraceable. I want to own my son's debt. I want to be the man he's terrified of." "That's dark, Gregory. Dark." I looked around the room at the water stains, at the unemptied trash. "Dark is letting your father rot in a place like this while you cash the check from his stolen house. Dark is planning to have me declared insane so you can pay off the men you're really afraid of. No, Harrison. This isn't dark. This is rebalancing the scales." For the next 48 hours, I was a ghost. I was the perfect patient. I sat in the recreation room pretending to watch a grainy television. I nodded politely to Frank, the orderly. I ate the gray mush. I acted confused when they took my blood pressure. I was fragile. I was gone. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Harrison was a whirlwind. The first call came. "Phase 1 complete. The injunction is filed. The market is in chaos. Crestview stock is down 32%. The board is in an emergency session." I just nodded, and slowly, painfully, I tried to put a puzzle together on the card table, a puzzle of a barn. I made sure to put the roof pieces in the sky. The second call. "Phase 2. The offer is made. AC. Trust has offered $9 million for the entire 12-facility portfolio." "That's an insult," I whispered, smiling. "Exactly," Harrison said. "It's an insult they have to accept. It's the only all-cash offer on the table. It barely covers their debt, but it makes the shareholder audit, my audit, go away. They're cornered." I spent the next 48 hours in a state of suspended animation. I was living in two worlds. In one, I was Gregory Caldwell, room 12B, a senile old man with no family, no future, and no hope. In the other, I was a predator circling my jaws, closing in on my prey. Leo and Sabrina visited again. They were glowing. They were happy. The $400,000 had clearly been permanent. The pressure was off. They were safe. "Dad," Leo said, and his smile was genuine for the first time. "We're so glad you're settling in." "It's a good place, son," I mumbled, not looking up from my bowl of gray soup. "See," Sabrina said, patting his arm. "I told you. He's happier here. He's safe. We did the right thing." They were so pleased with themselves, so proud of their monstrous final solution. They had no idea that while they were patronizing me, My lawyer was in the final stages of a $9 million acquisition. The final call came on a Thursday, 3:30 a.m. I was already awake. Harrison. His voice was calm. It was the calm of total victory. Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. The wire transfer is complete. The documents are signed. Crestview Holdings no longer owns a single nursing home. I closed my eyes. So it's done. Yes, Harrison said. Welcome to the healthcare industry. Congratulations, Gregory. You are the sole owner of Golden Valley Senior Living. The next day, I was still a patient. I sat in my chair staring at the wall, the perfect image of a man waiting to die. I was still in room 12B, but now I owned the room. I owned the chair. I owned the rattling HVAC unit. I waited for Maria's shift. She came in at 3 p.m., her face set in the same lines of exhaustion. Mr. Caldwell, she said, checking my chart. How are you feeling? I looked up at her, Mom. Didn't play the confused old man. I looked at her, really looked at her with the eyes of an engineer, an investor, a boss. Maria, I said. My voice was no longer weak. It was quiet, but it was clear and firm. She froze. She had never heard this voice before. Mr. Caldwell, are you all right? I am Maria, for the first time in a long time. I motioned for her to come closer. She hesitated, then stepped toward the bed. Close the door, I whispered. I'm not supposed to. Please, just for a moment. What I am about to say will change your life. Her curiosity won. She pushed the door until it clicked softly shut. What is it? I looked her dead in the eyes. I want to thank you for what you did. You risked your job for a stranger. You showed me kindness when everyone else showed me cruelty. That is a rare quality. I just did what was right, she stammered, clearly uncomfortable. Yes, you did, and I believe that doing what is right should be rewarded. So I have a question for you, Maria. How would you like a new job? She frowned, confused. A new job, Mr. Caldwell? What are you talking about? I'm talking about a promotion, a significant one. How would you like to be the new executive director of this facility? Maria's face went pale. She actually took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. That's not funny, sir. You've lost your mind. No, Maria, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. I just found it. And as of 3:30 a.m. yesterday, I am the new owner of Golden Valley Senior Living. Now, do you want the job or not? Monday morning, 9 a.m. I was in Hell's cafeteria. The dining hall at Golden Valley was a symphony of human misery, and I was its captive audience. The air was thick with that smell, that unique suffocating perfume of institutional bleach, boiled vegetables, and the sour tang of despair. Across from me, a woman named Mrs. Petrov, her eyes as vacant as a cloudy sky, was rhythmically tapping her spoon against an empty bowl. Clink, clink, clink. The sound was maddening. I was in my designated spot. The dementia corner shoved against the wall in a squeaky, malfunctioning wheelchair that I didn't even need. My external persona was in full effect. I was slumped, my chin resting on my chest, a thin line of drool which I'd carefully managed with a sip of water trailing from the corner of my mouth. I was Gregory Caldwell, the senile old fool, the burden, the problem that had been solved. In front of me sat a bowl of what they called oatmeal. It was a pale gray, watery gruel. It was cold. I stared at it, my face a mask of vacant confusion. Inside my mind was a coiled spring. I was counting. Harrison was on his way. The staff moved around us with the bored indifference of zookeepers. Frank, the large, cruel orderly, was in the corner by the juice machine. He wasn't helping anyone. He was laughing, telling a crude joke to one of the younger, terrified-looking nurses. He was the king of this miserable little kingdom. And at the front of the room by the nurses' station stood the Queen, Mrs. Croft. the facility director. She was a thin, severe woman in a cheap polyester suit holding a clipboard like a scepter. Her eyes scanned the room not with compassion, but with the cold appraisal of a factory foreman checking for defective parts. She was the one who had taken Sabrina's bribe. She was the one who had personally enforced the special service on my room, ensuring my call button was ignored, ensuring my isolation. I loathed her with a cold, precise engineering passion. 9:01 a.m. The main doors to the facility burst open. They didn't just open, they were flung open, hitting the rubber stoppers on the wall with two hard, resonant thuds. The clink, clink, clink of Mrs. Petrov's spoon stopped. Frank's laughter died in his throat. Every head in the room, staff and resident alike, turned. Harrison Stone walked in. He was not the friendly, reassuring voice on the phone. This was Harrison Stone's senior partner in his battle armor, a $9,000 razor-sharp charcoal suit. His silver hair was perfect. His face was set in an expression of absolute cold neutrality. He was not alone. Flanking him, two on each side, were four other people. Two men, two women. They were all dressed in identical dark, severe suits. They carried expensive leather briefcases. They didn't look like they were here for a visit. They looked like they were here for a corporate execution. They looked, I thought, with a flicker of grim satisfaction, like wolves that had just been invited into the sheepfold. The entire atmosphere of the dining hall changed. The air crackled. The smell of bleach was suddenly cut by the faint, expensive scent of their cologne and perfume. Mrs. Croft, annoyed by this interruption of her absolute authority, marched forward. "May I help you?" She snapped, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Visiting hours are not until 10 a.m., and this area is for residents and staff only." Harrison didn't even look at her. He continued walking until he was in the dead center of the room. He surveyed the scene. He saw me slumped in my wheelchair. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. I saw a flicker of cold rage in them before he masked it. He turned to the woman on his right, the one with the tablet. "Ms. Gray, now." Ms. Gray stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was pitched to carry to cut through any other sound. "Attention. This is an emergency all-staff meeting. All employees of Golden Valley Senior Living are to report to the dining hall immediately. This is not a request." Mrs. Croft's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "Excuse me. Who do you think you are? You cannot barge in here and—" "Be quiet, please," Harrison said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The simple, cold command stopped her mid-sentence. The grumbling staff began to shuffle in from the hallways. Frank the orderly leaned against the back wall, his arms crossed, a smirk on his face, clearly enjoying the sight of his boss being challenged. He thought this was entertainment. He had no idea he was a star of the show. Mrs. Croft, trembling with rage, squared off against Harrison. "I am the director of this facility. You have no authority here. I am calling the police." She reached for her hip for the walkie-talkie she wore. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Harrison said, his voice dangerously soft. "My name is Harrison Stone. I am the lead counsel for the Alice Caldwell Trust." "The what?" Croft spat. "I don't care if you're counsel for the president. You are trespassing. Get out, now." "I assure you we are not," Harrison replied. He nodded to Ms. Gray. Ms. Gray tapped her tablet, and a document appeared on the screen. She handed it to Mrs. Croft. As of 3:30 a.m. Friday morning, Crestview Holdings' entire senior care portfolio was sold in an all-cash acquisition. Croft's eyes scanned the document. I could see the moment the blood drained from her face. I could see her hands begin to shake. This isn't possible," she stammered. We weren't notified. It was a private leveraged acquisition," Harrison said, "handled at the board level. And the new owner," he paused, savoring the moment, "is the Alice Caldwell Trust, which means we own this facility. We own this building. We own your employment contract." He leaned in, his voice dropping so only she could hear it, but I could read the intent on his face. And as of 9:02 a.m. this morning, that contract is terminated. You can't, Croft shrieked, her voice cracking, losing all its authority. I have a contract, I have rights, I'll sue. Please do, Harrison said, smiling a thin reptilian smile. We would be delighted to discuss your management practices, your special service fees, and your fraudulent billing during discovery. I'm sure the State Medical Board would be fascinated. Croft went silent. The color was gone. She was gray. Harrison nodded to one of the men in suits, a large man who looked like he could bench press a car. Mr. Davies, our new head of security. He will be escorting you from the premises. You will leave your keys, your badge, your laptop, and your files. You have 5 minutes to collect your handbag from your office. No, please, she stammered, looking around for support. But no one moved. Mr. Davies gently but irresistibly took her arm. She was led out of the room, sputtering threats and pleas, her entire world collapsing in 30 seconds. The remaining staff stood in stunned, terrified silence. They were frozen. Harrison turned to the room, his voice now booming with authority. That brings us to our next order of business. He looked at Ms. Gray. The list, if you please. Ms. Gray stepped forward again, her tablet in hand. Her voice was cold, mechanical, and final. The following employees are also terminated effective immediately for gross negligence, patient abuse, and violation of care standards. Your final paychecks will be mailed. You will be escorted from the property. You have 2 minutes. The room held its breath. Frank Miller. The smirk on Frank's face vanished. It was as if he'd been slapped. What? You can't. I'm in the union. Your union has already been notified of our intent to clean house, Mr. Miller, Harrison said. And they have been provided with video evidence of your conduct. They will not be supporting you. Mr. Davies, Frank is first. You can't do this to me, Frank roared as the security head approached him. Brenda Wallace, Ms. Gray continued, ignoring him. Brenda was the nurse who had laughed when Mrs. Petrov dropped her spoon and couldn't pick it up. She let out a small sob. Mark Jenkins, the night orderly who slept at his desk. Susan Price, the kitchen manager responsible for the gray, watery gruel. She named 6 more, 10 in total, the worst of the worst. The ones I had personally identified to Maria, who had then relayed the names to Harrison. It was a purge. It was magnificent. Frank was still yelling. Who is responsible for this? Who the hell is the Alice Caldwell Trust? Who are you people? The remaining nurses were huddled together, weeping, terrified they were next. The residents were agitated, confused by the shouting. The entire facility was in total chaos. And I just sat in my corner, in my wheelchair, in my thin gray patient gown. I slowly, methodically, picked up my plastic spoon. I dipped it into the cold, gray, disgusting oatmeal. I brought the spoon to my lips, my hand trembling with feigned palsy. And as Frank was being physically dragged past me, still screaming, "Who did this?" I looked up, met his eyes, and smiled. Harrison let the shock settle. The sound of Frank's distant, fading curses was the only thing breaking the stunned silence. The remaining staff just stood there, pale, not knowing whether to run or to beg for their jobs. Harrison straightened his tie. He walked to the center of the room, his expensive shoes clicking on the cheap linoleum floor. Now, he said, his voice cutting through the fear. For those of you who remain, let us be clear. The old way of doing business here is over. He gestured to the empty space where Mrs. Croft had stood. On behalf of the new owner, the Alice Caldwell Trust, I am here to announce a complete management restructuring. He let that hang in the air. Effective immediately, your previous director has been terminated for cause. Your new executive director is Mrs. Maria Diaz. He gestured to the wall near the kitchen. Maria was still standing there, still in her simple blue nurse's scrubs, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked as stunned as everyone else. The staff stared, their minds unable to process what was happening. Their floor nurse, their new boss. Maria took a hesitant step forward, then another, walking to the front of the room. She looked at Harrison, who gave her a single firm nod. She turned to face her former colleagues. Her voice was quiet, but it held a new steel-like authority. "There will be many changes," she said simply, "starting today. But my first official act as director is to introduce the man who made this possible." She turned, her hand extending, not to Harrison, not to the men in suits. She pointed directly to the dementia corner, directly to the squeaky wheelchair, directly to me. "Please welcome the chairman of the Alice Caldwell Trust, who has decided to place his permanent office right here to personally oversee this transition, Mr. Gregory Caldwell." Every single eye in that room, every terrified nurse, every shocked administrator, every confused resident, every eye turned to me. Sunday, 10 a.m. Showtime. I wasn't in my room. I was in Mrs. Croft's old office, which I had completely gutted. A temporary desk and a chair were set up along with a large monitor showing the security feed for the main lobby. I sat there sipping a cup of real coffee, the first I'd had in a week. I was still in my patient gown. The costume was essential. At 10:02, their BMW pulled up. Leo and Sabrina got out. They were glowing. The $400,000 from my stolen house had clearly worked its magic. Their immediate crisis was over. Leo was wearing a new, expensive-looking polo shirt. Sabrina was laughing, her hair perfectly styled. They looked like a happy, carefree couple coming to do their dutiful weekly penance. They walked through the front doors, and they froze. The lobby they had left last week was gone. The smell of bleach and old cabbage had been replaced by the faint, clean scent of lemon oil and fresh lilies. The flickering, buzzing, fluorescent light was gone, replaced by warm, recessed lighting. The cracked gray linoleum floor was gone, covered by a thick, plush, dark blue carpet that muffled their footsteps, swallowing all sound. The peeling mustard yellow walls had been painted a calm, tasteful cream. Soft classical music Vivaldi was playing from hidden speakers. I watched them on the monitor. They stood there completely bewildered. Leo literally looked back over his shoulder at the sign outside, checking if he'd walked into the wrong building. Sabrina's bright fake smile faltered, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. What the hell happened here?" She whispered, her voice just loud enough for the new high-definition microphone to pick up. I don't know," Leo stammered, looking around. "Did they redecorate? In a week?" They took a few hesitant steps forward, like animals sniffing a new strange trap. Their eyes landed on the reception desk. It was no longer the cheap particle board counter. It was a solid, polished mahogany desk, and sitting behind it, not in scrubs, but in a perfectly tailored navy blue blazer, was Maria Diaz. She was typing on a brand-new computer. She looked up as they approached, her face polite, professional, and as cold as a winter morning. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear and strong. "May I help you?" I watched them on the high-definition monitor in my new office. The office that 72 hours ago had belonged to the vile Mrs. Croft. They pulled up in Leo's BMW, the one I had unknowingly paid for through the allowance I'd been secretly funding for years. They looked happy. Genuinely, disgustingly happy. Leo was wearing a new, bright blue polo shirt, the kind he knew I couldn't afford. Sabrina had a new designer handbag slung over her shoulder, a cream-colored monstrosity that probably cost $2,000. They were laughing as they got out of the car, Leo patting his pocket. And why wouldn't they be? The $400,000 from the fraudulent sale of my home of Alice's garden was safe in their bank account. The loan sharks were paid off. The embezzlement was temporarily covered. The crisis was averted. They had won. They had successfully liquidated their senile old father, and now they were here to perform their weekly one-hour penance. The dutiful visit of the loving, concerned children to the man they had buried alive. It was all part of the act, part of the alibi. They pushed through the front doors, and they froze. I leaned forward in my chair, my hands clasped, savoring this moment. This was the overture. The look on their faces was worth the entire price of admission. The lobby they had left last week was gone. The rank, suffocating smell of bleach, boiled cabbage, and old urine was gone. The air was now clean, circulating, carrying the faint, crisp scent of fresh lilies and lemon oil. The buzzing, flickering, fluorescent tubes that had cast a sickly yellow pall over everything were gone, replaced by warm, recessed lighting that made the room feel like a high-end hotel, not a municipal morgue. The cracked gray linoleum, sticky with decades of grime, was gone. A thick, plush, navy blue carpet now covered the floor, muffling their footsteps, swallowing all sound. The mustard yellow, peeling walls were gone, painted a calm, tasteful cream. Soft, classical music Vivaldi was playing from speakers I'd had installed in the ceiling. I watched them on the monitor. They just stood there, utterly bewildered. Leo physically turned around, looking back over his shoulder at the building's exterior sign, as if to confirm he had walked into the right address. He looked like a rat who had just discovered his familiar sewer tunnel had been replaced with marble. Sabrina's bright fake smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, stunned confusion. What the hell happened here? I heard her whisper, her voice just loud enough for the new high-definition microphone array to pick up. I don't know, Leo stammered. He looked around, his eyes wide. Did they redecorate? In a week, who paid for this? They took a few hesitant steps forward. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, vibrating unease. This wasn't the territory they knew. This wasn't the dump they had thrown me into. This place had money. And then their eyes landed on the reception desk. The cheap particle board counter with the chipped veneer and the glass partition was gone. In its place stood a single massive desk of solid polished mahogany. It gleamed under the new lights, and behind it sat Maria Diaz. It wasn't Nurse Maria, not the tired, frightened young woman in cheap, oversized scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. This was Director Diaz. She was wearing a razor-sharp, custom-tailored navy blue blazer. Her hair was styled in a sleek, professional chignon. She was typing on a brand-new 30-inch curved monitor. She saw them approach from the corner of her eye, but she didn't look up. Not immediately. She let them stand there. She made them wait. I had promoted her on Thursday. I'd given her a $100,000 signing bonus and a blank check to fix this place. I told her, Maria, you know what's wrong here better than anyone. Fix it. And start with yourself. She had apparently taken that to heart. Leo finally cleared his throat. A small, nervous sound. Excuse me. Maria looked up, slowly. Her face was not the warm, conspiratorial face I knew from my dark, desperate nights. It was polite. It was professional. It was as cold and remote as a distant star. Good morning, she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing slightly in the newly carpeted lobby. May I help you? Sabrina, recovering her composure, stepped forward, her new handbag swinging. She was trying to re-establish her dominance. She looked at Maria's new suit, her eyes narrowing. Maria, is that you? What are you doing at the front desk? I am the new executive director of this facility, ma'am, Maria replied, her tone perfectly flat. Now, how may I help you? The word director hit Sabrina like a slap. She stopped, her mouth slightly open. What? We're here. Leo interrupted, his voice strained. To see my father. Gregory Caldwell, room 12B. He said it with that old familiar dismissiveness, as if he were asking for a piece of luggage he had checked. Maria Diaz nodded. One moment, sir. She turned to her new gleaming monitor. Her fingers, which I noted had a fresh manicure, clicked on the keyboard. 1 click, 2 clicks. She stared at the screen, her brow furrowing just slightly. Caldwell? She murmured as if to herself. Can you spell that for me, please? Sabrina huffed, her impatience returning. It's Caldwell. Gregory. Gregory. He's been a resident here for almost 2 weeks. Room 12B. He's a dementia patient. She emphasized the last part as if it were the key to unlocking the system. Maria's fingers clicked a few more times. Click, click, click. She scrolled with the mouse. She tilted her head. She looked at the screen for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. I watched them on my monitor. Leo was starting to fidget. Sabrina was tapping her foot. Finally, Maria shook her head ever so slightly. She looked up, her face a perfect neutral mask of professional regret. I'm very sorry, sir, ma'am. Sorry for what? Sabrina snapped. Just tell him we're here. I'm sorry, Maria said again, her voice clear and final. But I don't see anyone by that name on our active patient list. I watched their faces. It was magnificent. The confusion, the irritation, the slow dawning realization that something was terribly fundamentally wrong. What? What does that mean? Leo said, stepping closer to the desk. That's ridiculous. He has to be here. We admitted him ourselves. He's in room 12B. Just go check. Sir, I assure you, Maria said, her voice acquiring a slight edge of steel. Our system is brand new. It's updated in real time. We have no resident named Gregory Caldwell. Not in room 12B. Not anywhere in this facility. This is insane. Sabrina's voice was rising, getting shrill. Are you telling us you lost him? You lost a 71-year-old dementia patient. Is that what you're telling us? I will sue this place. Ma'am, please calm down, Maria said. Don't tell me to calm down. My father-in-law is missing. Get me your manager. Maria just stared at her. Ma'am, I am the manager. Then, check again. Leo insisted, his voice cracking with a new emotion. Panic. This wasn't part of their plan. A disappearing father-in-law meant police. It meant questions. It meant investigations into the very POA and house sale they were trying to hide. Maria sighed, a small put-upon sound. She typed again, slowly, deliberately, as if for a child. Caldwell. She clicked. She looked. Ah, she said, her face brightening with a false, helpful smile. Here's the problem. You're looking in the wrong database. What? Leo asked. Mr. Gregory Caldwell, Maria said, turning the monitor slightly so they couldn't see it, is not listed under residents. She paused. And in my office, I smiled. I watched them on the monitor, savoring the pure, uncut panic that was starting to ripple across their faces. Leo's mask of concern was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly face of a cornered man. What do you mean, wrong database? He demanded, his voice too loud for the calm lobby. Is he in a different wing? We demand to see him. He's in room 12B. Maria Diaz looked up from her screen. And then she did something I had not seen her do before. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a small, sharp, surgical smile. Ah, she said, her voice full of false understanding. You're looking for Mr. Caldwell. I see. You are correct, he was in room 12B. She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them lean in desperate for the rest of the sentence. However, she continued, her voice perfectly pleasant, Mr. Caldwell is no longer listed as a patient. Leo and Sabrina stared at her, blankly. He is, Maria said, relishing the words, listed as the owner. I watched Sabrina's face. The color drained from it, leaving her makeup sitting like a mask on pale, waxy skin. Leo just shook his head, a jerky, uncomprehending motion. Owner, what are you talking about? That's impossible. He's a senile old... He is the chairman of the Alice Caldwell Trust, which acquired this facility last Thursday. Maria interrupted, her voice like ice. And I'm afraid, as the new owner, he has personally reviewed and amended the visitor policy. Sabrina's voice was a reedy, trembling whisper. Amended? Amended how? Changed them to when? Maria Diaz leaned forward, her professional mask dropping to reveal the woman who had watched me shiver in that cold room. She looked them both one by one dead in the eye. He has changed your specific visiting hours, she said, her voice low, clear, and absolutely final. From 24/7 down to never. On the monitor, I watched as my son and daughter-in-law finally understood what they had done. On my monitor, I watched the comprehension finally hit them. It was beautiful. Sabrina's face crumpled. The shock was so profound, she looked like she'd been physically struck. She simply stood there, her mouth open, making a small, silent, "Oh." Leo, however, imploded. The color didn't drain from his face. It flooded into it. A dark, dangerous, mottled red. His eyes, which had been wide with confusion, narrowed into slits of pure animalistic fury. Dad! It wasn't a call. It was a roar. A guttural, wounded sound. He didn't lunge at Maria. He lunged past her, past the mahogany desk, heading for the hallway. Heading for my old room 12B. He was going to find me, to drag the senile old man out and shake the truth from him. He never made it 2 steps. Mr. Davies, my new head of security, the large, quiet man in the dark suit who had been standing discreetly by the new floral arrangement, moved. He didn't rush. He simply materialized. He intercepted Leo's lunge with a solid, unmovable wall of muscle. One hand grabbed Leo's bicep. The other planted itself flat on his chest. Leo, all his rage and panic, hit him and just stopped. It was like watching a wave break against a cliff. "Don't touch me," Leo bellowed, shoving. Mr. Davies didn't shove back. He simply held. He applied precise, effortless pressure. A second guard, just as large, stepped in, blocking the hallway completely. "Let me go." Leo struggled, his expensive polo shirt straining. "That's my father in there. You can't keep me from him, sir." Mr. Davies's voice was calm, bored, and amplified by my new microphone system. "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice." Leo was trapped, pinned between the immovable object and the unbreakable desk, with his wife watching his world collapsing. The rage turned to pure, sputtering desperation. "Sabrina, call the police, call them." And that was my cue. I watched the monitor in my new office, the one that still smelled faintly of Mrs. Croft's cheap perfume and new paint. I watched my son, his face a grotesque mask of purple rage, physically struggling against Mr. Davies. I watched my daughter-in-law, her face a waxy, pale mask of disbelief, her hands clutching her new expensive handbag. I heard Leo's desperate, strangled roar, "Sabrina, call the police! Call them!" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. It was a single-origin Kona, freshly ground. It was excellent. I'd had it overnighted. I stood up. I was no longer wearing the thin, humiliating gray-blue patient gown that tied in the back. I was wearing a suit. It was a Savile Row suit, dark charcoal wool, hand-stitched with a subtle windowpane check. A suit my wife Alice had insisted I buy 20 years ago for a particularly hostile takeover negotiation in London. "It's not a suit, Gregory," she'd said, smoothing the lapels. "It's armor." It still fit perfectly. I buttoned the single horn button. I adjusted my cuffs. I walked out of the office, my hard-soled leather shoes making no sound at all on the new plush navy blue carpet. I turned the corner of the hallway and stepped into the lobby. Leo, Sabrina. My voice was quiet. It wasn't the weak, trembling whisper of the senile old man they had committed. It was the voice of the chairman of the board. It was the voice of their father. And it cut through Leo's animalistic yelling like a surgeon's scalpel. He froze. His struggle with Mr. Davies stopped instantly. He turned, his body still tense, his chest heaving. Sabrina, who had been fumbling for her phone, looked up, her hand frozen in her bag. Their eyes locked onto me. I watched with a cold, clinical fascination as their brains tried to process the two images. The man from last week slumped in a wheelchair in the corner of the dining hall, drooling into his gray, watery oatmeal, his eyes vacant, his hands shaking. And the man standing before them, now immaculate in his armor, his hair combed, his eyes clear and sharp and cold as a winter sea. It was a cognitive dissonance they could not bridge. Their minds simply broke. "Dad," Leo whispered. The word was a question full of a child's confusion. He looked from me to Maria at the desk, to the new carpet, back to my suit. What is this? What are you wearing? What is going on?" Sabrina found her voice first, but it was shrill, unsteady, grasping at the only reality she knew. "Gregory, thank God!" She rushed forward a step. "These people, they're crazy. This woman..." She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at Maria. She said you own this place. Tell them, Gregory, tell them who you are. Tell them you're sick." "That is an excellent question, Sabrina," I said, taking a slow, deliberate step toward her. "Who am I? A few days ago, I was your senile father-in-law. I was a burden. I was a problem that needed to be managed." "No," she stammered, taking a step back. We were worried you weren't well, the doctor. Dr. Shaw. He said..." Yes, Dr. Shaw," I said, nodding. "The family consultant. The man you and Leo met with 2 weeks ago. The man you paid $5,000 in cash money you stole from me, by the way, to sign a fraudulent diagnosis. Yes, Harrison and I are very familiar with Dr. Shaw. My private investigator, a man named Miles, found him to be remarkably cooperative when faced with the sudden and permanent loss of his medical license." Sabrina's face went from pale to the color of ash. She didn't just stammer. She gasped. Investigator? But the money?" Leo stuttered, his mind seizing on the one thing that truly mattered to him. "The house. The $400,000. That was for your care. We were protecting it for you." "My care," I repeated. I let the words hang in the air, heavy with their own lie. "You mean the $400,000 you got from illegally selling my home, a home worth at least $1.5 million, using a fraudulent, expired medical power of attorney?" Leo flinched as if I had struck him. "You mean..." I continued, taking another step. "The $400,000 that you wired to a private offshore bookmaker in Macau at 9:07 a.m. on Tuesday. Before I was even in the goddamned ambulance. That $400,000, Leo." This time Leo didn't just go pale. He looked like he was going to be physically sick. He stumbled back, shaking his head, his eyes wide with animal terror. No. How could you? How could you know that? You were very sloppy, son," I said, my voice holding no anger, just a profound, cold, tectonic disappointment. "You were desperate. You used the exact same shell corporation to receive the house money that Sabrina used to hide the $80,000 she embezzled from her law firm." Sabrina let out a small, strangled squeak. "That's right, dear," I said, turning to her. $80,000. Stolen from client retainer accounts. A very, very desperate move. A career-ending move, but not quite as stupid as committing your father-in-law to a facility that he owns. It was too much. The information was too vast, the exposure too total. Their entire carefully constructed fraudulent world had been dismantled in less than 60 seconds. Leo's mind, cornered and terrified, snapped back to the only defense he had ever known. The one I had foolishly allowed him to use as a shield his entire life. "You can't do this," he roared, his voice cracking with panic, his eyes wild. He wasn't talking to me as his father. He was talking to me as the bank. We're family. I'm your son. You can't just destroy us. This is about money. It's just money. You have to help us. We're your family." He shouted the word family as if it were a magic incantation, as if it were a shield that absolved him of all sin, as if it were a credit card with no limit that I was eternally obligated to pay no matter the cost. I let the word hang in the air of my new, clean, quiet lobby. "Family," I repeated. I took another step. I was standing just a few feet from him now. I looked him dead in the eye.